In the next 15 minutes, I will show you the three-part system behind the NCOA telomere advantage. By the end, you will know the specific daily food that researchers identified as the primary active variable in the data, the thing that separates Nicoyan cells from everyone else's. Around minute 12, I will explain why the modern version of this same food actually accelerates cellular aging instead of protecting it, and why the mechanism explains exactly why it cannot work any other way. And the third piece, the timing factor the study documented that almost no one applies correctly, I will save for near the end because it only makes sense once the first two are in place. Let's start with what the data actually found. When the University of Costa Rica team moved from the lab results into the villages themselves, they began documenting the daily patterns behind the telomere gap. They expected to find something unusual, something rare. What they found was three behaviors repeated across nearly every household they studied. None of them were exotic. All of them were old. The first was a food combination eaten at nearly every meal. The second was a daily physical practice tied to work, not exercise. The third was a social pattern so embedded in daily life that the people practicing it didn't think of it as a health behavior at all. The first behavior, the one the researchers eventually identified as the primary variable, was the daily consumption of nixtamalized corn and black beans together. Nixtamalization is an ancient process. Dried corn kernels are soaked and cooked in an alkaline solution, typically lime water, for several hours before being ground into masa. The process has been used in Mesoamerica for over 3,000 years. The Nicoyans do it every morning. They have done it every morning for generations. They don't think of it as a health protocol. It's just how you make tortillas. Here's what nixtamalization actually does. It transforms the nutritional profile of corn in ways that simple cooking cannot replicate. The alkaline process releases niacin, vitamin B3, that would otherwise remain biologically unavailable inside the grain. It increases the bioavailability of calcium, iron, and zinc. It reduces mycotoxins, the mold compounds that accumulate in stored corn and create low-level chronic inflammation. And it produces a specific type of resistant starch that feeds the gut bacteria responsible for producing short-chain fatty acids. Those fatty acids reduce systemic inflammation throughout the body, including at the level of the cells where telomeres live. A 2022 study published in the journal Nutrients analyzed the gut microbiome composition of Nicoyan adults over 65 against matched controls in urban Costa Rica. The Nicoyan microbiome showed significantly higher populations of Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, the bacterial species most consistently associated with lower inflammatory markers and longer telomere length in aging populations. The researchers traced the difference primarily to resistant starch intake, and the primary source of resistant starch in the Nicoyan diet was nixtamalized corn consumed daily at nearly every meal. This is the mechanism the modern food industry missed when it tried to replicate the corn tortilla. Mass-produced tortillas are made from masa harina, corn flour that has been partially nixtamalized at scale, dried, stripped of the bacterial cultures from the soaking water, and processed at temperatures that destroy most of the resistant starch. The shape is the same. The mechanism is not. You can eat mass-produced corn tortillas every day for a decade and produce none of the gut microbiome effects documented in NCOA. Here is your Tier 1 protocol. Find traditionally nixtamalized masa or masa harina from a Latin market where it is made fresh or stone ground. Look for brands that list only corn, water, and lime. Press them thin. Cook them on a dry pan. Eat two with your main meal alongside beans. If you cannot find traditional masa, dried black beans cooked with garlic and a small amount of cumin produce a similar resistant starch effect and begin shifting your microbiome within 2 weeks. Start there. Add 1 cup of cooked black beans to 1 meal per day. That is the floor of this protocol. Do this test right now. Think about the last 3 meals you ate. How many of them included any form of legume or whole grain prepared without industrial processing? If the answer is 0, your gut microbiome is likely operating on a narrow bacterial base. That narrowing is what the NCOA data was measuring when it found the telomere gap. The correction starts with the first meal you eat after this video. Within 7 days of adding black beans daily, most people notice their digestion changes. Bloating may increase briefly. That's your gut bacteria adjusting. It passes within a week. What stays is more stable energy and less mid-afternoon fatigue. That is your first signal that the cellular environment is shifting. This is just the first layer. At minute 11, I'll show you why the second element, the one most people would expect to come first, doesn't work without this foundation already in place. Now let's talk about the second pillar. And this is where the NCOA data surprised the researchers most. The team expected to find that the Nicoyans' longer telomeres were explained primarily by diet. Food is measurable. Food is quantifiable. Food fits the research model. What they kept encountering alongside the dietary data was something harder to measure. The Nicoyans had a concept they called plan de vida, literally a reason to get up. Every person interviewed, regardless of age, regardless of income, described a clear sense of daily purpose, not a career goal, not an aspiration, a simple, concrete reason that today specifically mattered. For one man, it was his coffee plants, which needed tending before the rains came. For an 87-year-old woman, it was the 2 grandchildren she cooked for every morning. For a 79-year-old, it was the weekly gathering at the community water source, where he was the one who knew how to repair the pump. None of these people were optimizing for longevity. They were just needed. And being needed, the data suggests, changes the cellular environment in ways that food alone does not. A 2019 paper published in JAMA Network Open analyzed data from over 6,000 Americans over 50 and found that individuals with a strong sense of purpose had significantly lower rates of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and premature death. Effects that held independent of diet, exercise, income, and social connection. The biological mechanism runs through cortisol. Chronic purposelessness, the low-grade directionlessness that characterizes modern retirement for many people, keeps cortisol elevated at baseline. Elevated baseline cortisol accelerates telomere shortening directly. The Nicoyans don't have a longevity protocol. They have daily work that matters. The result is the same. Here is your Tier 2 protocol. Identify one thing in your daily life that requires you specifically. Not something you can delegate, not something someone else could do just as well. Something where your presence, your knowledge, or your relationship is the irreplaceable part. For some people, this is a grandchild or a neighbor. For others, it's a garden, a community role, a craft, or a repair skill. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that it creates a daily reason to get up that exists outside yourself. Do this alongside Tier 1. The beans shift the cellular environment biochemically. The purpose maintains it hormonally. Neither fully works without the other. Try this right now. Think of one person or one thing that genuinely needs your attention today. Not your email, not a task, something that would be meaningfully worse without you. If nothing comes to mind immediately, that's important information. It means the hormonal side of the NCOA system is missing from your life. That's fixable, but you need to fix it deliberately. Within 30 days of combining Tier 1 and Tier 2, most people report something they describe as feeling less fragile. Less like the next illness or fall is the beginning of a permanent decline. That feeling has a biological correlate. It is what cellular resilience actually feels like from the inside. Now we reach the third element, the timing factor that the study documented, and that almost no implementation of this system gets right. The University of Costa Rica team's data included detailed meal timing logs, and when they analyzed the logs against the telomere measurements, they found something the food and purpose variables alone didn't explain. The Nicoyans ate their largest meal in the first half of the day, not because of any rule or health advice, because their work required it. You walk the fields at dawn. You tend the plants through mid-morning. By 11 or noon, you are hungry in a way that demands a full meal. By evening, the body has spent its energy. You eat lightly. You sleep early. This timing pattern matters at the cellular level. Mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside every cell, follow a circadian rhythm. They are most efficient at processing large nutritional inputs in the morning and early afternoon. When you reverse this pattern, light breakfast, large dinner, you force your mitochondria to process their heaviest workload at the moment of lowest efficiency. The result is increased oxidative stress inside the cells. Oxidative stress is one of the two primary direct causes of telomere shortening. The Nicoyans aren't protected because they eat better food. They're protected partly because they eat the right food at the right time. A 2020 study from the Salk Institute measured telomere length in two groups eating identical diets. One group ate their largest meal before 1 p.m. The other group ate their largest meal after 7 p.m. Over 12 weeks, the early eating group showed measurably slower telomere attrition. Same calories, same food composition. The timing was the variable. Here is your Tier 3 complete system. Tier 1, add 1 cup of cooked black beans or traditionally nixtamalized corn tortillas to 1 meal per day. This feeds the specific gut bacteria that reduce inflammation at the cellular level. Do this for 7 days before adding anything else. Tier 2, identify your daily plan de vida, the one thing that requires you specifically and protect time for it every morning before other demands take over. This regulates the hormonal environment that either accelerates or slows telomere shortening. Tier 3, shift your largest meal to before 1 p.m. Not a small lunch, a real meal, the kind that is eaten when the body is ready to use what it receives. Make your evening meal light. Soup, beans, a small portion of whatever you have. This aligns your mitochondrial efficiency with your nutritional input timing, and the cellular data shows it matters. Here's the full timeline. In the first 7 days, your digestion shifts. The resistant starch from the beans is reorganizing your gut microbiome. Energy becomes more stable. In 30 days, your sleep begins to deepen, especially if you have shifted the large meal to midday because your body is no longer processing a heavy metabolic load during the hours it needs to repair. In 90 days, the pattern becomes structural. You stop deciding to do these things. You just do them. That is the point where the biological effect stops being a protocol and starts being a life. The Nicoyans didn't set out to protect their DNA. They set out to feed their families, tend their land, and show up for the people who needed them. The cells responded to that life the way cells always respond to the environment they live in. They adapted toward resilience. Here's the contrast. In the West, we take antioxidant supplements to protect our DNA and eat our largest meal at night while watching television alone. In Nicoya, they eat nixtamalized corn and black beans for breakfast, work at something that matters through the morning, eat a full meal at midday with their family, and rest in the evening. No supplements, no protocols, no optimization. The telomere data found a decade of biological age difference between these two approaches. That gap is not explained by genetics. It is explained by the pattern. The one thing you can do today, cook black beans tonight and eat them tomorrow morning with whatever else you usually have for breakfast. That is the first step of the Nicoyan system. It costs less than $1. It takes 10 minutes if you use canned, and it begins shifting the cellular environment that the 2013 University of Costa Rica researchers found sitting underneath a decade of biological age difference. If this story has changed the way you look at your daily habits and the food in your kitchen, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the hidden history and biological truths that have been overlooked for too long. Let's build a more resilient future together. The next treasure of longevity will be opened soon.